Good evening. Tonight, History of the Heartland is with David Wilhour, and it's our great privilege, David, to have you with us tonight. You've done so many things in the community. You've been a political leader. You've been a business leader. You've worked on many different projects, and tonight I want to go through and touch on each of those aspects of your background. But maybe before you start, give us a little bit about where you came from, where you grew up, your family roots and values.
Okay, I'm originally from Owanico. That's Owaneco, little town in between Taterville and Pena on Route 29. Grew up on a farm there, and I was born in Taterville. During the war, my dad worked at Staley's, so he couldn't get tires for the car. So we moved to Decatur for a period of time, and so my dad could get to work, and my dad actually worked at Staley's and worked out of the office at the ordnance plant. Worked 2 jobs there at that time. I have an older brother, 2 years older, John. He still lives in Owanico. I had a younger brother, Paul, 4 years younger. He passed a year ago in December. My parents, I can remember mowing yards and lived out in the country, and I had my bicycle rigged up so I could pull a lawnmower behind my bicycle, and widow ladies in the community, I mowed their yards starting probably 10 years old. We had churchyard, which is a mile and a half away, and it's over an acre. I can remember mowing that, and I got paid $3 for mowing the churchyard. Well, my parents, I gave $1 back to the church. I gave $1 because there was a mission that helped people in need, and I got to keep $1. And so to me, that early on, and we had a cemetery there that was an acre too, and I got $12 for mowing and trimming it. But my folks always, you got to give back where you live or work. And if you can do something that makes a difference in somebody's life every day, it's important. And to me, that's my goal, is try to make a difference in somebody's life. And these random acts of kindness is, I try to do a random act of kindness every day to somebody. Whether it be a little old lady at the grocery store that can't hardly get up to get her cart, and I make sure and get a cart for her, or some mothers don't care for my random act of kindness when their kid is wanting something from the candy thing, and I said, here, go ahead and let me get this. And I try to do those kind of things.
We were talking earlier, and you mentioned the 3 F's.
Oh yeah, my folks, my mom particularly, and my mom was a certified lay minister for a Methodist church. So she got called upon time and time again to go to different churches where their pastor was on vacation or sick or whatever, and actually preach. So my mom preached at home too. And to me, the 3 F's of life: your faith, your family, your friends. And that's what life is really all about. Is, if you don't have all those 3 things, you're pretty poor. And funny thing, years later, you read Billy Graham's book. Billy Graham talks about the 3 F's.
Yes, that's remarkable. So then at some point, something brought you to Decatur. What brought you here? Well, your dad had worked at Staley's already.
My dad worked at Staley's, and that's a funny thing. Is I rode with him to work, and Staley's at that time started at 645, and I don't know if you guys remember, east side of town, 22nd Street. Staley's started at 645. G started at 7. Caterpillar started at 7:18 to try to, so we didn't have a traffic jam. We didn't have 4-lane streets. Persian Road was 2-lane road, and the railroad track was there. It wasn't an underpass. So I rode with my dad, and I was supposed to interview at Staley's. And my dad, my mom's sister's husbands all worked at Staley's. Cousins all worked at Staley's. I was supposed to go to Staley's for an interview. Well, I dropped my dad off of work. I went over 22nd Street and went to a restaurant there. And, of course, all the talk in the restaurant is Caterpillar's hiring. Caterpillar's hiring. Well, So I went out and filled out an application, got an interview, and they told me they called me for a physical. So I didn't go to Staley's. And so when I picked up my dad that night, and he said, how'd it go? And I said, well, it's pretty good, but I didn't go. I went to Caterpillar. And he said, what? You're going to have to tell your mom. So we lived out in the country there, and we pulled in the driveway here. My mom always wore an apron. You know, if company came, she'd fold the apron up like this, because it could be dirty. She comes out there towards the car, and she says, I got the craziest phone call today. It says you're supposed to be at Caterpillar tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock for a physical. What's going on? And I said, well, I went there and filled out an application, got an interview. They told me they called me for a physical. Well, you're supposed to be at 8 o'clock. She says, you shouldn't have. She says, all they want to do is go on strike. She says, you'll be off work more than you work. Staley's work steady. Just that. My mom was not happy about me going to work at Caterpillar. And let me tell you, through the years, she was not really happy about me until later on in years. Then she understood. And the funny thing is, I worked third shift, and I rode a bus from Taylorville. Had a bus run up there, go to work at 11:18 at night, get off 7:18 in the morning. Probably the second week of work before I even had my 30 days in to join the union. Guy comes around and says, we're going out at midnight with sympathy with Peoria. Strike. So I go to my boss, and I said, well, he said, hey, if you want to come back in, you need to go, you need to leave. So I left, the bus went home. I go in, like, folks, 4 o'clock in the morning. My mom was coming down the stairs. What's going on? What's going on? I said, they're on strike. She says, I told you. She was not really happy about me working at Caterpillar for a number of years.
Well, you ended up in the human resource function, but you didn't start there. You did a lot of different things there.
I came to Decatur in 1963. I hired in 59, got laid off end of July in 60. Was laid off for a short period of time because the way the contract read at that time, you didn't have to accept a job until you come back to the same classification. Well, I didn't draw employment. I got laid off on Friday at Caterpillar. The following Wednesday, I was working at Sangamon Paper Company in Taylorville, greeting card company. I worked there, so I never drew unemployment. I enjoyed my work there. I was a material handler and stuff, but Caterpillar offered me more money to come back to Decatur, so I came back as a sweeper. I hired in as a sweeper, but I moved up. I was a material handler. I was A, B, C. I was a C when I got laid off. I didn't have to accept the C job, but the A job paid more than my job at Taylorville. Right. So I took the A job. Consequently, a lot of people that got laid off at the same time I did lost their seniority because they was laid off longer than they worked because they didn't accept a lower job. So that was real. That leapfrogged me way ahead of a lot of the people. And so then I went from sweeping the floor over to the machine side, and this is maybe if you take the Decatur Tribune, I went to work for Paul Osborne's dad, Sam Osborne, who is a mechanical genius. Gear line, and gears are hard to make. In fact, Heckler gears, where it's the teeth or angles and stuff. And Sam, he can figure all that stuff in his head. He don't have to even get. He's a genius. So I was working on his line, and then I had a chance to move over to heat treat as a helper. And I liked working in there. I mean, it's just, you moved around a lot of different jobs and such, but the safety store job came open, and the gentleman that ran it was Jerry Marshall, and he was a good friend of Sam Osborne. Well, Jerry Marshall come down to talk to him, and my present boss, Al Arnold, says, hey, go ahead. And so I went up to Jerry's office and talked to him, and he said, my friend Sam Osborne told me that you was a good young man and stuff. Well, gee whiz, before we hadn't talked 15 minutes. He says, well, go home and talk to your wife and come back and let me know if you want the job tomorrow. I says, I don't need to go home and talk to my wife. We've already talked. If I get a chance to get a better job, I'm going to do it, and a company job was a better job. So I said, I'll take the job. He said, okay, I'll have to get with them to see when they can release you and stuff. So it was another week before I actually started up there. But a safety store clerk. I think that was 1963, 1972, I think, is when I went. They built a new building, and I went out as a safety inspector. Okay. And actually, of course, you go to night shift.
Okay.
And that's the age-old thing in industry. You go to night shift and you climb back to days again.
Up and down.
Yeah. And so consequently, they opened the next building, and I was able to come back to days because, I mean, there was only one person more senior than me.
I see.
And so then I went from safety inspector to personnel in 1974, and as an interviewer, and then I went to affirmative action coordinator in personnel, and then we had a downswing.
Well, that must have been a big change, right? When you went from
I was in
inspector.
safety. I was 13 years.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden you were an interviewer.
The funny thing that happens is young people today impatient.
Yeah.
I sat in the same job for 13 years.
Yeah.
I got moved to the interviewer's job. The next 3 years, I had 5 promotions.
Yeah.
So to me, the whole climate, the whole thing had changed.
Yeah.
So yeah,
well, how did that happen? How did you go from safety over to?
Well, the thing that happened, of course, was under human resources.
Yeah.
And the personnel service manager.
Yeah.
had been the benefits manager. And of course, as a safety inspector, anybody gets injured, you work with those people. You interact with those people on accidents and information and such as that.
So you had a relationship.
You had a relationship.
Yeah.
And obviously he must have liked the way I went about business because when he had an interviewer's job open, and he offered me that interviewer's job.
Yeah.
The employment supervisor had been there since 1955. I worked for him 1 year, and he retired. When he dumped a lot of stuff on me in 1 year, which was beneficial to me the rest of my life.
Yeah.
I mean, he'd been there, done that,
Yeah.
knew how people thought, such. One of the things I remember is he said, if somebody comes into your office mad, don't stand up. Tell them to have a seat. He says, when people are mad, sit down, they lose all their steam. If you stand up to them, they might hit you. And when you think about that, and how many times I used that, people would come in, I mean, just veins sticking down the side of their thing. I said, have a seat. Close the door. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. And it works. It works. And I mean, like I say, that's a valuable lesson there that I got a long time ago.
So when you moved in the interviewer job,
right?
And how long were you there?
Well, I was in an interview job for about a year and a half. And let me tell you what, we were taking applications on Monday mornings. We'd get between 600 and 800 applications every Monday morning.
Wow.
Only from 8 to noon. Well, then, those applications, we had the clerk out there that she was going through all these things. And then she put them in alphabetical order. Then I'd have to glean through those for skills. And, of course, we were always looking for welders, always looking for people with simple experience. Well, because we had federal contact, you had to adhere to the federal regulations. So we'd mark those as according to as the federal jobs codes. So you go through those and well, if you can imagine, 600 to 800, it's a lot of paper.
Yeah.
And so I was covered up with paper, but I was going through them as fast as I could and then give them over to my boss. He'd schedule interviews, and then once we start scheduling interviews, he'd schedule an interview every 15 minutes after 8 o'clock. We start interviewing at 8 o'clock. Well, by 10 o'clock, I was behind.
Yeah.
Because 15 minutes, you can't interview anybody in 15 minutes.
Right.
I was behind, so consequently, you don't eat much lunch.
Yeah.
And then again, you start at 1 o'clock. Well, then we would always try to be done by 3 o'clock. Most of the time, I wouldn't get out of there at quitting time, so to speak.
Yeah.
But I loved what I did, so it
Sure.
didn't make any difference, you know. And human resources don't pay overtime.
Yeah, right.
Factory does.
Yeah.
Human resources don't, but it's fine.
Yeah. But you so by that time you really knew the business, though. You'd put it. You had seen the operation. You knew all the different aspects of it.
Well, and the thing is, I can glean an application, and I can remember my daughter. She'd gone to Illinois State, and she'd actually in the business curriculum. She transferred to Carbondale, SIU, and she switched majors to biology. Well, she had 2 years of business courses. So, and she got the job down there, and she wanted to stay down in the summertime and stuff. And so I said, hey, that's fine, but I want you to get your grade transcripts from Illinois State together, and I want you to have to go to John Logan at Carterville there, just east of there, and see what you can do to get a 2-year business certificate. She thought Dad was crazy, but she did, and you can't believe the first job that she really applied for when she moved to Oregon. He says, "Well, hey, you got an associates in business." And I told her, I said, you start looking at resumes, they all look the same. Yours is going to look a little different, and that will make people look at things. You know, it just that's what's all about. The 1965, 68, had major cutback. I went back to safety. I went back to safety as a safety supervisor. I was only back there for 1 year, and then I came back as the personnel supervisor.
Okay.
The guy replaced my original boss, had been the personnel assistant. He'd moved to the supervisor job. So then he retired. I came back there as the personnel supervisor. Then I don't know that. Trying to think here. Okay. After that, then I moved to personal services manager, which is both over the personnel, over the benefits area, the job that the original guy that gave me the job had. You know, so that it was division manager, and then that was 1995, I think, and then. 1995 is when I moved from personnel service manager to community affairs manager. Chuck Kipler had been the community affairs manager forever, and he retired. And vice president that we had plant managers from 55 up to a period of time. Then we had vice presidents. Now they're back to plant managers again. But had 2 vice presidents in there, and Mike Flexenauer was vice president. Asked me if I would move over to community affairs job, and I loved that. Of course, I was involved in the community, and obviously it showed, because that was the first thing he told me. He says, "Hey," and he says, "Hey, I'd like to offer you that job." And I said, "Oh," I said, "I don't know." I said, "I'm not a very good writer." He says, "I'm not hiring you for a writer. I can hire writers." He says, "Every place I go in this community, everybody knows you because you're involved." And and to me, obviously, as my mom always said, put your best foot forward. So obviously, I was making some good impressions on the community people that caused me to be able to get a better job.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah, and they allowed me to go out and do everything I'd been doing, and I was getting paid for it. Before, I was doing it on my own time and taking vacation and all that kind of stuff.
So at that point, it's kind of like your professional life. Then was integrated with what you were doing in the community in a way.
Exactly.
So maybe we should step sideways and say, okay, well, really these things are happening in parallel, right? So,
sure.
So you were already involved in the community.
I'd been a precinct commitment. I was precinct commitment for 16 years.
Yeah. So how that started? What gave you the idea that you wanted to do that?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because I'd gone to work there in a safety store. Caterpillar, Chuck Hippler. Yeah. They were offering the Chamber of Commerce practical politics class.
Oh.
Okay. So I was young, and I how many credit hours I've got. I don't have a degree, and I'm not proud of that, but I don't have a degree. But I've got a lot of credit hours and a lot of things, and I've got a lot of certificates in industrial hygiene, both from the National Safety Council and from Michigan State University had the best industrial hygiene program in the world. And I got a lot of certificates from there. Caterpillar paid for it all. All you got to do is go to school and work. Yeah. And I had asbestos removal, asbestos management, all those things, certificates, and I haven't kept those up because, I'm not working in that. Yeah. But to me, the whole thing that comes together, this practical politics class, comes down and says, hey, go out and meet your precinct commitment. And, and we don't care whether, and the two guys leading it, both were leaning left, and then one of them, they were both employees. I didn't lean left. I was over here more in the middle of the road, more conservative than them. So I went and met with the Republican precinct commitment in my precinct. I lived on East Main Street, where Crackles is. I lived right across the street there. It was Dairy Maid.
Okay, yeah.
Right across the street. Yeah. And so I met with the precinct committeeman, and he was an older guy, and he says, hey, I'm glad to talk with you. I've been thinking about giving this up. Would you want to be the precinct committeeman? And I said, I don't know. He said, I'll tell you what, he says, I'll help you. So he helped me, and consequently, and I know you've been around Decatur very long, Roy Anthony used to be the Democrat county chairman. Okay, he had the precinct next to me. Okay, you talk about building relationships. Roy Anthony, next precinct to me. We're out walking, passing out material. I met Roy. We become friends. I had tremendous respect for him. He had tremendous respect for me. And like I say, Roy Anthony, I ran for the county board, got beat by 3 votes in a Democrat district. But as Kenny Tater told me, he says, you won. We never had anybody come that close before. So I lost the first time I ran by 3 votes. And so, it's a thing that I enjoyed, and because of that, my first board I served on was Mosquito Abatement Board. And of course, Kenny, that I was ambitious young committeeman, had a job, a seat open there, and so I was on the Mosquito Abatement Board for I don't know how long. I was president of the board, and went through a lot of things there. I mean, understood how government works, boards and such, and then I moved from there out to Hickory Point Township, and of course that's Republican heaven. Right. And I'm precinct committeeman there, and I'm on the township board. And then a gentleman passed away on the board, the county board, and my name got put in a hat. And there was 5 of us interviewed for it, and I was the person selected for it. And but I had to resign from the township board, and I'd been on it for probably 10 years or so, because you could now township, you can serve on township board and county board simultaneously. Then you couldn't. So, but I served on county board for served his 2 years. I run for another 4 years. And then we were right in the middle of our work stoppage thing, and I was the personnel manager at that point. And I had more than a full-time job. I worked 7 days a week for. I didn't have any vacation for 3.5 years. Wow. I was a prisoner in my own house. I'd come home, I had a 90-minute tape on my answering machine. It'd be full. Covered with just crap. and I mean, damage to my car, mirrors knocked off. I lived in Mountford Townhouse. I'd gotten divorced during that time. I lived in Mountford Townhouse, and mirrors knocked off, car dented in, tires flat. I ended up, Caterpillar bought me 2 different sets of tires. I finally had a neighbor down the street that had an extra garage, and I went to him, and he rented me the garage, and I left my car in the garage, and this outside security people, we had advanced security people, and they'd come pick me up in the morning, take me to work, and bring me home in the evening. Now, normally Saturday or Sunday I'd go to the grocery store, but most of the time I was a prisoner in my own house. And there's people that still won't speak to me today because I was the person given the job to hire replacement workers. And bottom line is, if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have a job. But the bottom line is, Decatur plant is still here. Now, if we hadn't been able, that's the reason the Wilhour plant closed. They couldn't get qualified people to perform the work that needed to be done. We're blessed in Decatur. Caterpillar's got some of the best welders in the world, best machine operators in the world, highly technical jobs, and talk about changes. It's like this. And that's my bigger concern with Caterpillar, Decatur, any manufacturing company, is finding qualified people to do the job.
So these things were happening in parallel. You had a highly stressful job at CAT. At the same time, you were politically active. What was your political activity during those years? Were you still politically active?
Yes, I was. I belonged to Young Republicans, and that back to Skinny Taylor. Young Republicans in Macon County wasn't going like he wanted it to go. It was kind of doing this and this. And again, you think about things that people tell you. Skinny told me, he said, "Hey, I want you to get involved in that and change it." Well, the way to change something is get involved with it and change it from within. Don't go out here and march on the street, tear something down, or say, "Hey, this is not good." Get inside and change it from inside out, and it becomes a fruit. It bears fruit. Because of my activity like that, I started attending district Young Republican meetings. I was a district deputy for the congressional district, which was Macon, DeWitt, Bloomington, Lincoln, those count, Payette. So George Ryan, he was a Young Republican, Kankakee. So I knew George Ryan. His folks run a drugstore, and actually George Ryan was a pharmacist, and so he held a state office. So I knew George Ryan as a young person, and he didn't change much. but no, I got to know a lot of people around the state, and it's just I enjoy that activity. And that was all on me. I was footing the bills when I was going to conferences on Saturday in Chicago, and paying for my room and all that. No political party wasn't paying for any of that.
So during that, now how long was your career at CAT? How many years were you there?
43.
43 years.
Yeah.
So that's an amazing story, right? And that's very rare these days.
Well, I agree.
But you saw. Generations, right?
Yes, but
generations.
Mechanical and inside, the big change.
Yeah.
I went to work there. We had an adjustment floor. Top running rail cranes, which are big cranes. And, they run on the I-beams of the 5-ton auxiliary, 15-ton big block. The building where they do all the manufacturing now, over in Building D, when they put those cranes in, 50-ton main block, 15-ton auxiliary. So, and when I left, they was reinforced. I think that they've got them so they're about 100-ton now, because everything just got bigger and bigger. I was there when we built the first off-highway truck. It's 35-ton. Now, I was there when they built the big one, the 400-ton. As you can imagine, 400 tons, how big that I mean,
massive,
that's what it's hauling, 400 tons.
Yeah.
It itself's got 13-foot tires, or like 5 foot or 4.6 across, and I mean it's just, and Michelin built those particularly for that truck. I mean that's the only people who build them for it, and it's just, I mean, from 1959 till I retired, Caterpillar was on a plane like that. It's just
Steep
up,
plane.
up,
Yeah,
up,
yeah.
and like I say, the thing about the turbulent 90s. Because we were able to find qualified people, that plant's still there. I'll just guarantee you there were plans. The place in Texas that Aurora took the excavators and everything to, they had planned on moving the Decatur plant there too. We were able, and I feel very proud of that, to be able to find qualified people to do the job. We built quality product, was able to take care of the customer. That caused those 500 jobs that when they end up closing the Aurora plant, come back or come to Decatur.
Yeah.
Medium-sized, large loaders, compactors. Compactor, I saw a lady yesterday in Dollar General. She had a cat hat on, the shirt and stuff. I said, "You work cat?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "What area?" She said, "Compactors." And I said, "Hey," I said, "let me give you a little history. Compactor wheels used to be built in Decatur, and we shipped them to Aurora. And then we ran out of space, and it moved up there." But so to me, we were blessed, and like I say, I feel like that I was a part of that. Reading those resumes, finding the right people to do the work, and like I say, I would put Caterpillar welders and machine operators up against anybody in the world. They're the best, and of course, you've got to have the best to build the best.
Yeah.
And Caterpillar, I think, speaks for itself as far as its reputation of equipment.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, you can't touch it.
Yeah. Well, time has borne that out.
Amen.
Yeah. So you did see some pretty massive changes on that.
Excuse me.
You saw some pretty massive changes.
Oh, well, yes. And the thing is, again, until just recently, the guy that retired, that was the general manager. We went plant managers to then vice presidents, and we had 2 vice presidents, and 3 vice presidents, and then when Rob Bissell retired, they went back to plant managers again. I worked for every plant manager up until the new general manager. I know who he is, but I never worked for him. I worked with him. In fact, one of those plant managers along the way was George Schaefer. He ended up being chairman of the board of Caterpillar.
Amazing.
And the funny thing was, I was actually working personnel services at that point. And my boss called me. He says, "Hey, can you come down to my office?" I said, "Sure." So I went down to his office. He had a gentleman in there with him, and so I knocked. He said, "Come on in." And so this guy introduced me to it, and he was from U.S. Secret Service.
Oh.
I said, "Okay." And he says, my boss says, "He's doing a background check on George Schaefer, and you're the only guy here at the plant that was working here when George, none of the department heads, they knew who he was, but they never had any interaction with him.
Yeah.
I had interaction with him, and they was looking to him for ambassador to France.
Oh.
They were doing a background check for ambassador to France, and I thought, gee whiz, how small. Let me tell you, every plant manager, from the first one here, every one of them that I dealt with would have been successful no matter who they worked for. They were good, smart business people, and they happened to work for Caterpillar. They were top drawer people. I mean, they were good business people, and that, to me, that's what makes a company strong.
Now, at some point, you began to be involved with the credit union, and you described earlier that originally it was Caterpillar employees that were running it.
Right, and that the credit union standard form is state charter. There's 2 ways you have credit union: state charter, federal charter. And we're state chartered. It was formed Decatur Caterpillar Employees, and that was the name of it: Decatur Caterpillar Employee Credit Union, chartered with the state. It was inside the plant. employees that worked for the credit union at that time were Caterpillar employees, and the credit union just reimbursed them. Well, back in the turbulent times with financial, things was going up and over 15% interest and things. Caterpillar decided that it'd be best that they part ways with the credit union. So I happened to be chairman at that point, and so they helped us, and Caterpillar, like I say, bent over backwards. In fact, the piece of ground that we bought there on 27th Street belonged to Caterpillar. We negotiated with them, and we got it at a very good price, and below the appraised price, so they were decent with us, and we moved outside the plan. We had 3 employees that were Caterpillar employees that quit the company and come to work full-time for the credit union. And like I say, we were about 50 million when we come out, and I think the most recent thing was 256 million. So we've grown over 200 million since we came out. Plus we built 2 buildings and bought another building. So it's like I say, credit unions to me are people helping people, and we've got a little slogan at First Movers: friends, family, and you. And it reminds me of what my folks said. The 3 F's,
Right.
But it's friend, family, and you.
Yeah.
And to me, that's what it's all about.
And you're still on the board.
Yeah, I've been on the board since 1974, I think. I think that's when I was asked to serve on that board. And like I say, I have passion for it. I was the legislative rep for Ralph G. Long chapter, which is Macon County Credit Unions. So I got involved again, my political things. I was right in there. Well, then in 1996, Caterpillar come to me and says, "Hey, we'd like for you to be community affairs manager. Along with that, you're registered lobbyist for them." So I could no longer lobby for credit unions. I lobbied for Caterpillar.
So that's 45 years then. You've been in position with credit unions.
I'm still going, and I tell you what, I'd like to get off. And I had a plan here about 4 years ago, and it was a good plan. A young lady, we put out feelers, and this young lady was an accountant, and she's a smart young lady. She come on, and I was mentoring her. And I'm going to slide aside, and she's going to take over. And she called me. She said, "Mr. Wilhour," she said, "I've got bad news for you." And I said, "Oh, no. What's going on?" She said, "I just accepted a job in Peoria." So she took off to Peoria and lost her. So, and it's hard to get people to serve for nothing. And I'm a move around person. I'll guarantee you, we got 9 people on our board. I get into every Mount Zion, Forsyth. We have a call center, the old library in Mount Zion. You know where it is, right next to the fire. That's Earth Movers Call Center. There's no signs or anything there. We transact no public business there. It's strictly a call center. And let me tell you what, that thing is going like that. Young people, they want to text you, they want to call you, they don't want to walk in. My stepson and his wife live in Island Ranch, Colorado. They've bought 3 different cars since they've been there. They've all been financed through Earth Mover Credit Union because the rate's right and they're treated right. And that's my daughter-in-law at the onset. She had not had experience with them. Now she's the person that does the deal.
Now, you talked earlier about a little bit about your political involvement, starting at the precinct level, and then I
was on the township board, and then we had a gentleman that our county board rep. One of them passed, and they asked me to put my name in the hat. I was one of 5, and I was the person that got selected of the 5 interviews. So, and I served for 6 years, and then we were started into the 1988 was the last contract we had, and then we worked without a contract, and then we got where we actually locked people out and hired replacement workers. And I was too busy at work.
Too busy to do that.
Caterpillar paid better than the county board.
Yeah. What Looking back, what did you think about being on the county board? What kind of experience was it?
Well, I enjoyed it. In fact, my good friend Chuck Hippler gave me good advice when I got appointed to that thing. He says, now, he says, every time there's something controversial going on, there's going to be a reporter. Of course, he used to be a reporter.
Okay.
There's going to have a tape recorder right in your face. So make sure your brain is engaged before you open your mouth. Again, very, very good advice. I pass it on to my grandkids. Make sure that you're hooked up here before you start opening your mouth. Reporters love to find somebody that's all frustrated and just yapping, and they're just running off at the mouth, And to me, do you remember Dawn Marble, reporter? She had the county. She and I, of course, had had a divorce. I was living there in Mountain. I'd come home and I was working late and stuff. I'd have voicemail from her saying, "Mr. Wilhour, the committee meeting at 4 o'clock today, what happened?" She didn't run there. She wanted to know what happened, Well, it's after her deadline. And, of course, she told me point blank, she said, "I think that you don't return my calls because I miss my deadlines." And I said, "I'm going to tell you what, I return your calls as soon as I get them. As soon as I get home, I return them." When she got ready to leave, she went to law school. She quit and went to law school. She told me, she said, "You're the most difficult person that I ever interviewed in that job because you always thought before you spoke." And reporters don't like that.
Right.
When you give them a good answer, they don't. They like these answers that just blurt out,
Now you were involved in all kinds of community services, and you ultimately were recognized in just a couple years ago, 2017. You were the Citizen of the Year in the year.
The thing that happened is by being on the county board, and again, I happen to be a Republican. The county board chairman when I went on was Democrat, and Don Dipper, and I don't know if you know Mr. Dipper or not. They've been in Macon County forever. Decent person. He treated me wonderful. In fact, I couldn't ask for anybody being treated any better. He's not political. He made me chairman of the negotiation committee, and I negotiated with the highway, with the deputies, with anybody I had contract with, because of my experience at Caterpillar.
Right.
And again, the relationship. Don Dipper and I are friends today, and he had an accident here a couple of years ago. He was doing rehab. I went to see him every week when he was doing the rehab and stuff. But to me, I went on the Visitor Convention Bureau Board, represented the county. County has one seat on there. I was on there for, I don't know, probably 15 years or so, because once I come off the county board, they could still appoint me, but they was appointing somebody from the county board. So then there was the city actually appointed me. I served on that for forever, and of course the boat races. Gary Anderson, mayor, wonderful person. He wanted the boat races, and I said, "Hey, I can help do that." And so we made that happen. It was a fun time. In my retirement, Terry Howey was the mayor, and they had him speak at my retirement get together. In fact, he spoke there a little bit, and he says, "I'll tell you what, this guy's involved. He's more involved with the events in Decatur than I am." And he'll tell you that today. I like doing things.
Yeah, but you had a reputation as somebody who could get things done. Why do you think you were able to be so, in terms of making things happen? Why do you think
to me, you surround yourself with like-thinking people, or if they don't think like you get them involved. And the first thing you know, I've taken young people, Decatur Celebration. I was in charge from day one, from my first job was porta potties. First year, porta potties is all I did.
Yeah.
After that, it was alcohol control, wristbands and stuff. Get all these different volunteer groups, the realtors, the different groups to run those things. And again, my point with them was, hey, I don't care what you do. I don't care how much you drink. Outside of here, I want you drinking in this ticket booth or this table. You can't be drinking. 10 years I was chairman of that. I don't think I drank a beer, and I like to drink beer. I didn't drink a beer at Celebration. And to me, it's not do as I say. If you're talking like you got to walk the talk. And I told people, I said, hey. They say, hey, you need help next year? I said, no, because you drank. And they said, well, I said, hey, I told you I didn't want you drinking. And to me, you can't conduct the business when you're drinking. It's just, that was my, and let me tell you what, it's Fred Bowie, and she worked with Fred. I told him, I said, get the beer to even dollars. Because we're using Magna Bank now. First National Bank is the bank. Over at Civic Center, you take quarters. And when things are 75 cents, you need quarters. And I mean, lugging them around, you know. I was so happy when they went to $2, you know. You eliminated a lot of quarters. Yeah.
Bills are a lot lighter.
Yeah,
that's one.
But the citizen year thing was plumb out. I mean, that just totally blowed me away. I got it, and of course I was involved. That particular thing, the thing that Julie talks about. Before that though, would dredge the lake. And if you remember all the controversy over now, the thing that happened is so many city council people through the years, we've had 4 major water studies. 4 major water studies. We spent a lot of money through the years on water studies. And this Black and Beach people, I mean, they're world known, and they're good. I've read those. City council people sitting on city council have not read them. There's people at the city that's not read them. I've sat down and read those things.
You've done your homework.
The first one, need more retention. Second one, need more retention. Third one, need more retention. Fourth one, need more retention. The thing that we missed on was the plan that Pete Paulin and them put together. They were going to go out there north of 72, east of Forsyth, and build a reservoir there, actually pump water out of the lake to that reservoir for retention when we get a lot of water in the spring, and save it. Well, school board got involved because they were going to build houses around that and nixed the whole thing. Well, let me tell you what, that made a lot of sense. And let me tell you what, the vice president, I'd retired, vice president of Caterpillar, was in on that planning, and there was going to be bargain for them to get earth moving equipment to build that water retention well. There's lease stuff all over the United States. That was going to be their contribution, was going to be to help them. And to me, we missed on that because the school board, and I'll tell you the person's name after you turn off that. But to me, they killed that, and that made so much sense. That because we could pump water there when we got water, then we can draw it off when we need it. So I was an advocate for dredging, and I appeared before the city council more than once. I lobbied with every city council member, and of course the end result, it passed. And we've got a good lake. We've got enough water retention. We've done good. We've got to maintain it. Now the main thing is with these new city council people come on, I say, hey, we've gained this. we can't lend its silt back in.
Right.
We've got to keep maintenance going upriver here, and limited to the Soil Water Conservation District, and I've worked with them to me strips so that you don't get the silt into the river. And that's the whole thing. And the company that did this, Chicago Dredge and whatever their name is, they up the river by Ray's Bridge, they've gouged out some big area and then we just it's a catching point. Then we come back and clean those out, and that way the silt won't get on down in the lake.
Right.
And it's just, but I've been involved in, like I say, I did a lot of arm twisting on that. But back the sheriff's office, and actually Tom Snyder was sheriff, they took the school resource officer, because of budget cut, they didn't have any money, took the school resource officer out of the classroom. Well, I've had a strong opinion that law enforcement has been under fire in America for 4 or 5 years or so. I mean, think about how many policemen have been ambushed, firemen have been ambushed, first responders. It's just awful. Well, the way to change that is education. We need that resource person in the schools, these young kids understanding, as I tell my grandkids, run to the uniform, not from the uniform. So I got really involved, and Jay Dunn was the chairman of the county board, and he's Democrat, and people look at me and say, Jay Dunn and I can work together, we can work together on a lot of things, because he's fiscal responsible. Tom Dipper's Democrat, he's fiscal responsible, and that's what it's all about.
Sure.
So I got involved with the committee that was trying, and so what I brought to the table was the two people who run it is President Sheriff, and Dale Pope was actually the deputy that was helping them. I lined up with service clubs, Ministerial Alliance, and they all looked at me and said, I said, hey, let me tell you what, you get these Baptist ministers, these black ministers to buy in, they're going to be telling their congregation how to vote, I'll guarantee you. And they all need it. They all need that. And they support law enforcement. So we met with the Ministerial Alliance people, made that happen, and it was good. I mean, it's very rewarding. In fact, Tony will tell you today that he thanked me time because there's preachers that he met at that he didn't know.
Sure.
Now they've built some relationships, and that's what it's all about. So that, and what happened that particular morning, that Tuesday morning, I got up, and of course the polls opened at 6. I was down one of the busiest intersections in Decatur are Route 51 and Southside Drive, where you come by WND, come up 51. You go north here, Mound Road is busy, Pershing's busy. I live in South Shores, so I went out there and stood on that island, and I had a referendum sign. It looked like it could rain. I had my raincoat laying there.
Yeah.
Well, people drive by honking. I said, well, Judy Moore lived down by the golf course at that time. She's since moved. She drove by. She saw me. Well, she's got a son that's a deputy. I didn't know that she had a son that was a deputy. He's a detective. Well, as she says, when she drove by, I'm out there, and it was mist and rain at that time, but people honking, and I knew the sequence on the lights. I'd be over here when they're coming up there, over here, you know. Tony Reed from the Herald Review, he come out and he says, "How did you get over here without getting hit?" Talk to me stuff, but to me, that's the kind of commitment I have when if I go after something, I go after it to win. You don't ever think about losing. You always think about winning when you go after something. And to me, that's what you. Just like I told them when I went on that committee, I said, "We're going to win this," and they says, "No, I hope so." And I says, "No, you're not hope. We're going to win it, and you need to be the winner too." So to me, you've got to work the right people. That's what you got to do. Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful, David. You know, I've got one final question for you. Is really about, a lot of people retire and then they move to Florida or somewhere like that and move on, and you haven't done that.
I told them when I accepted that award, I came to Decatur 1963. There isn't a better place in the world to live, work, raise a family. And you're not going to find a more giving community than Decatur, Illinois. I don't care. I'll put us up against anybody for a town our size. Funny thing, being a food drive, I was involved with food drive. First food drive we had. Retired out 36 East there. And we had a semi-trailer. Joe Fletcher, Joe Fletcher. Joe Fletcher was at the Herald Review. Now he's over at St. Mary's. He was at WSOY. He and I were up in that trailer, and we were just putting stuff. Well, we realized right after noon that we was going to have to start moving stuff, stacking it up more, getting more food than we anticipated. So I was involved from day one on that, and then the year that we went over 500,000 pounds, and people just couldn't believe, I was at my daughter's in Corvallis, Oregon at Rotary. And so I'm sitting at this table there, and they meet at the country club. And this is how small the world is. Guy sitting over there, he says, I was from Decatur, Illinois, he says, I've got a sister. He said, I'm from Decatur. I've got a sister in Decatur. I said, you're kidding me. He says, no. And it's Joanne, it used to be Joanne Skidmore, had balloons and blooming. Joanne, I forget what her name is now, married name. Her brother.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's a small world.
Yeah.
But so I'm talking about, I said, hey, Decatur, Illinois, and I said, Soy capital of the world. I said, we like to think it's capital, it's motivator capital of the world. But I said, really, the thing that I'm probably most proud of is a food drive that we have each fall. And I said, we just went over 500,000 pounds of food. Well, this guy sitting next to me there, he says, 500,000. He said, are you sure you got your zeals in the right place? Well, I didn't know at the time, he was kind of questioning my 500,000 pounds. Well, the guy sitting next to him got up, and I thought, okay, he went to the restroom a lot. Well, he was with the newspaper, Gazette, whatever it is, Gazette something. Well, Lee Enterprise owns that. He come back to the table, and he says, hey, Joe, they went over 500,000 pounds. And I said, how do you know that? He said, I just talked to Gary Sawyer. Gary Sawyer used to be in Corvallis in the newspaper. In fact, the funny thing there is I met Gary Sawyer. I was downtown. They since have closed that building. They moved to a strip mall. But I knew Lynn Enterprise owned that. So I was at my daughter's, and I was downtown walking around, and I went to the newspaper, and I said, hey, I'm from Decatur, Illinois. And the lady said, we own that newspaper, too. I said, yeah, I know that. I said, is there any chance that I could talk to your editor or publisher or whatever? He said, well, he's getting ready to go to the meeting. He'll talk with you on the way out. So he come out, shook Gary Sawyer's hand, met him, stuff. He says, hey, come back. He said, I've got a meeting I've got to get to, but he says, I'll be happy to visit with you sometime. I come back from that vacation. We have a meeting out at 8 a.m. And I'm sitting and you know Bernie Kraft, in fact. And we're sitting there, and Gullidge, who was here at the newspaper, we're sitting there, and then, of course, Bernie said to me, he says, I tried to call you last week, and you were gone. I said, yeah, I was in Corvallis, Oregon, at my daughter's. Gully's sitting over there, and he almost goes white. He says, Corvallis, Oregon. I said, yeah. I said, in fact, I met the newspaper guy. I said, he was going to a meeting. I said, we shook hands and talked and stuff. And the funny thing is small world, is Bernie Kraft was getting ready to retire, and Bernie Kraft and I have worked on Salvation Army, on different things. Jerry DeMerge and I worked on the United Way, and like I say, Jerry is just solid as a rock too. I mean, you need to talk to people like that. But Bernie Kraft said, well, I want you to meet person we've hired is going to take my place is Lou Batchteller. A year ago, Lou Batchteller and his wife bought the condo right next to me. He's retired now. They've got a place in Oregon, got a place in Florida. They did have a place in Omaha, and they sold it. But he's got grandkids here. It's a small world, But what happened after the meeting out in the parking lot, Gully says, "Hey," he said, "You met Gary Sawyer?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "I just offered him a job." So Sawyer cuts it down, and of course, again, that's the other people we have. Gary Sawyer's in town. He'll tell you the first week he was out to Caterpillar. And as he said, he's got Caterpillar hats to wear. Yeah. But to me, the newspaper is very. Let's be transparent. We're not sitting over here. We're not mean people. Let's be transparent about that. So that's what it's all about. I don't have any hidden agenda. And that's why did I say in Decatur? I love it here. Yeah, I'm disappointed in our state leadership. I'll guarantee you, if I won the lottery tomorrow, I'm going to be leaving Illinois. But I love Decatur, and I'm not happy with the way things. It costs us 3 times as much for our work comp at Caterpillar as in Decatur as it does in Indiana. Something's wrong. Yeah. Something's wrong. It's just, you can't tax. You can't borrow yourself to success. Yeah. You can't tax yourself to success. You've got to not spend more than you make. Yeah. And that's what it's all about. Yeah. And budget. I called out the newspaper on budget. And the funny thing here, a couple of weeks ago, my wife had an appointment over at Springfield, and I picked up a Springfield paper, and I tried to school these people. I said, we don't have a budget, we have a spending plan. Yeah. Budget. If you look at Webster's definition of budget, what goes out, you've got income to support it. That's a budget. It's balanced. Yeah. A balanced budget is income and outflow is the same. It's covered. We have a spending plan. Right. We don't have a budget. Yeah. And I'm in touch with my county board reps, the county board chairman, both Democrat, Republican. They hear from me on a regular basis. I was for the recycle thing that Mr. Buffett bought the ground. They're doing a study now. That could be a real boon for Decatur, for Macon County. Whether it's going to be financially feasible. It's tough to recycle and make any money. They have to have the compost where they can. They have to have that to even be sustainable. And we're the single stream recycling indicator. I'm the guy that pushed that. I come back. My daughter, Oregon, of course, they've got wonderful stuff. I come back with pictures of. They've got a place at Allied Waste where people can. They've got recycling. But they can come down and recycle on their own 7 days a week. Got bins to put stuff in. Batteries, oil, all kinds of stuff. I brought those pictures. I sat down and I met there with Ryan McGrady about Billy Tyus. And let me tell you what, we miss Billy Tyus. Billy Tyus, McGrady gave him the reins. Billy Tyus put that single stream recycling together. And it is there's none better any place. And I pay $29. We've got a bargain. We've got a bargain. And to me, I didn't like the little red bins. You have to sort. My recycle I love. And to me, I was an advocate of that. That's when I went to Jay Dunn and sat with him and talked about doing things. So then when he got this opportunity, he called me and says, hey, he says, I'd like to meet with you. So we sat down, and then I was on that committee that, and it's not dead yet. It was Howard's paying for a feasibility study to see if it could be profitable or not. And in all fairness, Kevin Greenfield, in all fairness, he's not funny. When I called him about it, and he wasn't chairman at that point, I called him. He says, "Hey, I'm against it." Okay. So I said, I'd like to sit down and talk with you. He said, well, he says, I go to work early. And, of course, he runs the Sieben Concrete out east. I don't know if you know and he's township supervisor in Long Creek Township, so he's got plenty of work. He says, I go to work early. I said, okay, what's early? He says, 7 o'clock. He said, I'm normally there at 6:30. He says, but we open at 7. So I'm sitting waiting on him at 6:15. And he comes pulling in at about 7:15. He says, you wasn't kidding, was you? I says, no. And I said, if you've got phone calls and stuff, just tell me. I'll step out, whatever. So we sat there and we talked for 2.5 hours. Now, he told me on the phone he was against it. When I left his office that day, he says, yeah, I can do this, I could do that. And so I had him, in fact, when they voted on it at the county board, Jay thought 4 people would be voting no, and all 4 voted yes. I met with every county board member before that vote. I went out, Phil Hogan, I called him one evening. He said, hey, we're harvesting. I said, okay, tell me where. So I went out, parked my car, got in the combine with him, rode a couple rounds, got out of it. And to me, that's when you take and meet with people one-on-one, look them in the face, have a handshake, they have trouble going backwards when you're sitting in the room when the vote comes up. Now, if you are just on the phone, email, they can do anything they want. But when you sit there and talk with them and tell them all the good things that can happen, that was my closing statement at my thing. If you hear all these people talking about the bad things in City Decatur, come with me one day and I'll show you more good things than you can show me bad things in the City of Decatur. And like I say, I can drive you around this town and just show you thing after thing after thing that is good about Decatur.
Well, David, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I mean, you've really very touching about, and a great example of not only building relationships, but how to constructively, really use those relationships and work with anybody, regardless of what their orientation is, but to find common ground and to use that to get things done.
Real quick one is trade agreement with China. Way back, I was still working. Dick Durbin. And it was costing us $3,000 for these 35-ton trucks to get them into China that we built here.
Yeah.
And so, again, one of these crazy things, his secretary, of course, she was Paul Simon's secretary too, Jackie Williams. Jackie Williams' brother was on my Little League team way back when. So that's where I knew Jackie Williams.
Yeah.
So when I talked to Paul Simon, I served on the state job service, Caterpillar. I served on numerous wage things and stuff, but state job service employers committee. In fact, our employers committee, there used to be unemployment office and employment office, 2 separate offices. And we remember it was downtown, down by the bus station, and one was around the corner and one was here. When I went on that employers committee for the state of Illinois, job service, unemployment, we merged those 2 offices in the same office. Okay? That wasn't a popular thing because one of those managers at each one of those offices lost their job. Right. Okay? But it made sense.
Yeah.
And it's still working very, very good today, and I'm proud of that. But so we'd go to Washington D.C. and Caterpillar, of course, allowed me to serve on that committee. We'd go to Washington D.C. Had this business owner from Chicago area tool and die shop, Joe Salami, president, and he did, like he said, he was doing about $30 million worth of business in the world. Well, we got to Washington D.C. and meeting the congressmen and representatives, all that kind of stuff. And that evening, was there 2 days, that evening he says, I can't believe, and Gloria, the gal that coordinated everything, she tried, she says, I can't believe we couldn't get in to see Paul Simon, our senator. So next morning, I called and I said, hey, Jackie, I said, I need some help. she says, okay, let me schedule all this kind of stuff. She called me back. She says, hey, you come over to the office, you and your Joe. Went to the office. She took us, and you've been in the Capitol.
No.
Yeah.
I've been there outside of it, yeah.
Well, you go inside, and in fact, they've showed on TV. There's a little monorail down below that goes from the Capitol, from the Senate office building over there. Well, we went down and got the monorail, went over and went up, and we had lunch with Paul Simon and his wife in the Senate dining room.
Oh, wow.
Well, guess what? Joe Slamey, I was chairman of the employer committee for the state. Joe Slamey, man, I could call Joe, and he started calling anything he wanted political. He started calling me about. But I mean, we went with Paul Simon, but he had Jackie was Paul's secretary. So then Durbin. So trade agreement with China. So I called Jackie. I said, hey, is there any chance of talking with the senator? And she says, okay, what about? I told her, I said, trade agreement with China. Boom, 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 boom. She says, okay, let me talk. So she called me back in a day or so, and she says, hey, he'll talk with you at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Fine, I'll be available. Talk with him. The first thing Dick Durbin said to me, Caterpillar's done nothing for me. And they haven't. I mean, he's in bed with labor. I said, I understand that, Senator, very much. But I'm talking to you about 300 jobs in Decatur, Illinois, that are all UAW jobs. Now, you can't tell me the UAW hasn't helped you. There's silence. He says, well, you're right. I said, okay, I know you come home almost every weekend. Is there a weekend here in the next 3 weeks that I can meet with you? And I say, I meet with you. I would like for you to meet with our UAW president, our UAW bargaining chairman, and understand what they. He says, let me check my things. We'll be back with you. Saturday morning, I met Dick Durbin. Now, my vice president was giving me permission. They wouldn't give me permission in Peoria because they wouldn't talk to Dick Durbin. So, Saturday morning I met, had the UAW president. I filled her in, and she was Karen V. Houston and the bargaining chairman, David Hess. We all met in the conference room. We did a PowerPoint presentation with them. And I said, okay, I'm going to leave the room. I'm going to let you folks talk. I'd already schooled them on 300 jobs and stuff. A little bit they come. He went back to Springfield. Next week he calls, or Jackie calls and says, hey, he'd like to talk to you. So, and this is like it. He wants to talk to you at 11:15. So I got on the phone at 11:15. He says, hey, I'm going to announce at 11 o'clock I'm going to vote for the trade agreement with China. And I says, super. I says, does Bill Lane, our Washington guy, no. I said, did Doug know in Peoria? No. I'm not dealing with them. I'm dealing with you. He says, I don't want you telling anybody anything until my news conference. I don't want it out before. So then I was caught.
Yeah, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, huh?
So, called my boss.
Yeah.
I'm over his office. We're down to the vice president's office. Vice president hits the phone. He calls the chairman of the board.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, chairman of Caterpillar.
Yeah.
He says, hey, I've got Wilhour and Mealy sitting here with me. Wilhour just got off the phone with Dick Durbin, and he's going to announce at 11 o'clock he's voting for the trade agreement with China. Chairman says, does Doug know that? Does Bill know that? No. I said, and so I told him, I said, I'll tell you what, we're at the point where it was easier to ask forgiveness than to ask permission. He says, I hear what you're saying. He says, we won't blow it. He says, but he says, I can't believe that he says, I'm going to get them on the horn. So he tied us all in, and these two guys in the Washington guy, he says, Wilhour, I don't know how you did that. Dick Durbin would not even give us the time of day. But it was the UAW people.
Right.
I use the UAW,
Sure.
but yet see the company don't want to work with the UAW people. And as I always said, we've got a signed contract. If you don't believe in that signed contract, then don't sign it. We signed that to work together. And when I retired, that union president, that bargaining chairman, sent me the nicest cards saying, hey, we're going to miss you because we can always talk with you.
Yeah.
And you can't, but yet I've got diehard people. Now, those people didn't, there's diehard people that won't speak to me today because I hired replacement workers. That's like a cancer. That'll eat them up in their lifetime. If they hold in that much hate, it'll eat them up.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I did the right thing. If I hadn't done that, that plant wouldn't be there today. And I'll stand on that all day long.
Sure. Yeah.
Everything. At one point, we had over 6,000 employees there. Don't take 6,000 employees to produce what we produce now. And that automation, you can't. Wages. You can't afford it.
Right.
You can't afford to have a sweep. Everybody has to sweep up after themselves. You can't afford to have a sweeper.
Right. Yeah. World's changed.
So,
Yeah.
hey,
Well, sir, thank you so
Thank
much.
you,
And on
thank you.
behalf of the history of Heartland, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
I love Decatur, and like I say,
Are we still okay over
hey,
here?
I'm going to take this with me so my wife